initially.
It's not a good time to build.
Get people coming to build. They have a lot of stuff.
Test.
QT.
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, it feels like it.
Yeah, I always, when I leave here, I'm gonna
Yourself.
try to be as hip as I can.
Work on it.
I know if I
Across the border.
fill up in Columbus, come back and make it happen.
Good evening, everyone. So at this time, I'd like to call this meeting of the Mills River Planning Board to order, perhaps. All right, at this time, I would ask you to join me as we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so you guys have received your agenda for this evening. Are there any adjustments or additions to the agenda? All right, I take that as a no. So we'll move right on to the next thing. So you received an electronic copy of our minutes from November the 2nd. Have had a chance to look over theirs. Are there any changes or corrections? And if not, I would entertain a motion to approve. Can we have a motion to approve? And we have a second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that is a unanimous approval. With the standing room only crowd here, I'm going to assume that there is no public comment. And that was a leap of faith, but okay. All right, so we're going to move right into our old business, which is discussion of the text amendment to add a public notice requirement to major residential subdivisions. And Mike has put together the text of that for us. And, I'll give Mike a moment if you wish to address that. I've looked through that and I'm satisfied that it covers the issues that we presented when we were here last, the things that we wanted to address. So I'll just let you give us the highlights and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Mike Malachek, zoning administrator for the town. I am just going to summarize my staff report as we have a couple people listening on Facebook Live. So at the November meeting, this board discussed adding the provision for both mailed and posted public notice for residential major subdivisions and directed staff to do so. And that's what we're presenting before you tonight. So the town currently has no public notice requirements for residential major subdivisions. It's not required by state law and it's not in the town code currently. And notice is normally not provided because single family homes, even in a larger subdivision, is a use permitted by right in many of the town zoning districts. Usually public notice requirements that we see are reserved for zoning and subdivision decisions involving change of use, rezoning, special use permits, and stuff like that. So state development and land use law, we have limited authority in regulating the subdivision of land, but we do have broad authority in how we control the review process. And so in my review of state law, adding this public notice requirement is consistent with what the state allows us to do. So the proposed text amendment before you tonight, case number TXT 2109, adds language requiring posted and mailed public notice to the subject property owner. You always have to notify the property owner that's submitting the application and all adjacent property owners. I'm recommending mailed notice to adjacent property owners because it's consistent with all of our other notice requirements. And after discussing this with the town manager, we didn't want to give, we wanted to treat all applications equally for all zoning decisions. So we didn't want to have a 500-foot notice rate, no public notice rate radius for major subdivisions, and then only adjacent property owners for a rezoning or a special use permit. So yeah, adding the public notice requirements will require more staff time and additional cost to the town. And I'll just say, we have talked internally about increasing the application fee for major subdivisions to cover some of those additional costs. But that'll come before town council as part of the visioning session and preparation for the next fiscal year budget. So we're recommending, staff recommends approval. It's consistent with our comprehensive plan. Obviously, the planning board can recommend approval with modifications, table or recommend denial. There's a statement of consistency in your packet. And then I did want to just go through the code and highlight a couple of the changes I made and where the new language will appear in the ordinance. So on the title page, you'll see there's a new section under general provisions, and this is excerpts from the subdivision ordinance. So the new section titled public notice required, right below traffic impact analysis required, 153.010 is where the public notice requirements have been inserted. And then if we page forward to that section, 153.010, you can see that for any residential major subdivision, we have mailed public notice as stated to adjacent property owners and a posted public notice sign. And then I also stipulate, and this is included in a couple other sections I'll cover, that any major amendments to a subdivision development plan that have to come back before this board anyway would also warrant public notice. Again, we're using the same state public notice requirements that we do for rezonings or any other land use decision, and that's mailed notice not more than 25 days, but not less than 10 days before the public meeting of this board, and then the posted sign in that same period. Skipping forward to line 183 through 188. I do talk about, again, the major plan amendments and that public notice would be required there. So just wanted to show that that's in a couple different sections of the ordinance. And then going to page 12, lines 215 through 219, I actually insert language that we use for all of our other public notice requirements that myself as the subdivision administrator, I'll always certify to this board, usually through a one-page document showing adjacent property owners that were noticed and signing off on that. Going forward to page 14, lines 251 through 267. This is where I actually get into, and hopefully we can define this a little more in future text amendments, what major and minor amendments to a subdivision plan includes. So basically, if a subdivision plan is modified that involves increasing the number of building lots or units to be constructed, a change in the subdivision, a substantive change in the subdivision configuration, road layout, and the like, or the change in use of any portion of the track, or development or building in areas that were identified as open spaces or protected areas, those are all major plan amendments. Now, there is some leeway that if there's a drop off and a developer needs to move a building 2 feet, that's something I can approve administratively, but again, I don't want to extend the limits of my authority. And so anything I consider major will always come back before this board per this language. And then if you go to page 18, this doesn't have to do with this, but like I've said before, I'm always going to read through our ordinances. Sorry, page 18, the section on variances, 153.122. I'm always going to read through the ordinance for errors, checking that everything's consistent with state land use law. This is just one example where town council was referenced for variances instead of our board of adjustment. All variances go before our board of adjustment. So that's just one correction I made here, and there's a couple other throughout the document. But that's all I wanted to highlight. So I'm happy to take questions.
Is this going to be retroactive? I'm thinking about the approval of the Pardee building over on 280. And they talked when they were here about adding additional buildings, as I remember. So is this going to be retroactive?
No, and that's prohibited through state land use law. One of the changes in the 160D amendments that were adopted by the town in April is something called permit choice. And basically it states in state law that a developer, if regulations are implemented after a permit's been filed, they can choose which rules they want to follow. So now if Pardee submits a new application in the future for future subdivision of land, that could fall under this. But again, the way I've written it, it wouldn't apply because this is residential major subdivisions only, not commercial or industrial.
One other question. I understand the rationale. One size fits all, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. That's kind of the way I hear it. One size fits all. I guess my question is, we have a large development. Aren't there impacts of a large development that might not be seen in smaller developments? In other words, it bothers me a little bit that doesn't seem that we are taking into consideration the impact of traffic on nearby. Traffic would be a bigger problem from a large development than it would be from a smaller development. Might that not require us to, or urge us to think differently about how we notify neighbors?
Can you clarify one size fits all? So are you talking, because I mean, major subdivisions are 11 lots or more, and so
Right.
that's what we're proposing. Are you talking about the commercial and industrial side, or?
Yes, yes.
Special use permits, which includes multifamily residential, do require public notice, so that would be captured. But if someone is subdividing land to put up a warehouse, that wouldn't, that would be permitted by right in the base zoning district, that wouldn't fall within these regulations.
I just have one question. I mentioned this before. Can we agree or have an understanding to increase the size of that sign to maybe? It just needs to be larger, the sign we put out. And we could come up with one, I said 4x6 before, and it's worked in other places because I've been familiar with them. And you could use the same sign over and over because it's going to say the same thing. You just change the address. But I don't see anything in this where I've read it that specify the signs that we're notifying people that we're posting on the property should be a certain size.
I mean, I heard your comments last time, and I mean, that's something I think we'll look at, available budget for purchasing in the future. I'm just wary of including it in ordinance language because if something were to happen, if the sign, we've had signs get hit by DOT mowers before and get broken. And if there were multiple developments, and this is all hypothetical, but if a sign were damaged and we were unable to post exactly what's in the ordinance, the town's out of compliance. So I see it as a potential liability. But I hear your feedback, and that's something we're looking into internally.
I understand that, and I agree with what you're saying about proposing or specifying in the ordinance. But I'd just like to have an understanding between us that we're going to increase the size of that sign, make it more visible. It's just the little political type signs we've been just not adequate.
I hear you completely. Yeah, we use 2x3 signs right now. And I think last meeting we had said 3x4 or 4x5. So that's something I can look at pricing out at a later date. Yeah, for sure.
And I also kind of read into, because I had thought about that too when I read through this, but to be consistent with other types of developments and such that need public notice, those signs, to be consistent, those signs would also have to be brought into the same. So we have to look across the board at all the signs that we're using for notification and make sure that they were all consistent. So it's not just this.
Correct.
I understood that. So, something to look at. I think getting this language set, and then that's something that we can look at budgetarily in the future would be great. But I'm sure Jim won't let us forget about it.
I had a question about the radius. Would it just be the neighboring properties, or would it be a 1 mile radius or 2, around it, or?
This is adjacent only. So if you share a property line with the developing property, or I say, if you're across a road from the developing property, stream, pond, lake, whatever it may be, As long as you're adjacent, you'll get mailed notice. And that's only because that's how we do it for every other zoning approval. And I just don't want to create the appearance that we're providing more notice for major subdivisions versus a special use permit, which, that could be anything. I think it's something to look at in the future. It would have to be changed. If we're going to keep it equal and consistent, it would have to be changed throughout the code, both the subdivision code and the zoning code. And I mean, that's possibly a question, for this board to take to council and, see where they are on that too, before proceeding with a formal text amendment. But that can be addressed with a text amendment as well, just multiple sections of our ordinance.
I agree with what you're saying. Adjacent property owners or is mailing them a notice, I think is more than adequate. But don't forget the sign.
So just, I think, as a point of clarification for those folks who may be listening tonight, the main thrust of this whole text amendment proposal was to make sure a major subdivision, when where that's proposed, is a residential major subdivision, is allowed by right. So this is not an opportunity to get public comment and have someone, stop the process. This is just to allow input to help us address any concerns that they might have within reason. And if there's a change to that subdivision proposal in the future, that those adjoining property members could have some input as we address that and perhaps put some conditions on that development or whatnot. It's not designed to prohibit a subdivision from occurring. It's just to allow some input and for us to make wise decisions with our community in mind.
And neighbors and the public, all meetings of this board are public meetings, so they can always come and provide public comment and can provide public comment for subdivision approvals. But you're correct, when reviewing subdivisions, and again, this is in state law, we're required to issue the permit if it meets all ordinance standards. Of course, you can hear public comments and approach the developer with conditions, but they don't have to agree.
Okay, are there any additional questions for Mike or any other discussion that anyone would like to have regarding this text amendment proposal? Okay, if you folks are satisfied, I am satisfied with this, and I would move that we recommend approval of this text amendment, which is case number TXT-21-09, and find that it is indeed consistent with the Making Mills River Comprehensive Plan.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous approval.
And I'm sorry, when you say it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, did you mean adopting the statement of consistency?
I
know-
did mean
Okay.
that we would adopt
That's
that
great.
statement.
As long as it's reflected in the record, we're good.
We discussed that. The more I try and get all my ducks in a row, they just scatter to separate flocks. I'm telling you. Nail and jello to a tree. So according to our agenda, we have no new business for tonight. Are there any additional items, any discussion, any updates?
I can provide a brief update. One of the reasons I wanted to bring this in its full form tonight for your recommendation is because in the last 2 weeks, we've received 2 new major subdivision applications. One for a 32-lot single-family home subdivision on Banner Farm Road across from the 8-lot minor subdivision that was approved a couple months ago or earlier this year. And one for Mills River Crossing Phase 4, which would be an extension of the part of the development north of Boylston Highway, extending to the west. That's proposed for 19 single-family homes, and they have a phase 5 that's part of that same parcel. That's all I have. Yeah. Happy to take other questions if you've seen anything around town.
This is not a question. It's just, I guess, a point of privilege to kind of, again, educate those who might be listening who don't understand. Just being in the community and seeing a lot of comments on social media. When we as a planning board and town council even gets applications for major subdivisions, I know there's a lot of concern that there's a lot of building and a lot of homes going up, but you have to understand that if that is being proposed in a piece of property that is allowed by right, and they fulfill all of the requirements according to our code of ordinances, we legally, just as Mike said, we can't say no to that. We can't, even if we don't like it. I voted for many things on this planning board that I didn't like, but it checked the boxes, and therefore we're bound to do that. So I would just encourage everyone to make sure you understand how town government works and what a code of ordinances means for town government. Okay, any other additional items anyone wants to bring up tonight? Okay, I would encourage each of you on Thursday evening, we will be swearing in new council members. There will be election of a new mayor for the town of Mills River. And immediately following that meeting, there will be a reception for our outgoing mayor and our 2 outgoing councilmen. So I would encourage you to attend that. Our meeting in January that you see there, January the 4th, during that meeting, we will also be electing our chairperson and our vice chair, and we will be scheduling our meetings for 2022. I think that's pretty much kind of already laid out. I think I saw that on our new and most excellently functioning website. So we'll just be looking at that, and I presume confirming that as well. Anything further?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn by Mr. Foster. We have a second. All in favor? All opposed? I wish all of you folks a very, very Merry Christmas and a wonderful New Year, and see you in January.